we are going to reconvene our meeting, and the first order of business is the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee. And Larry, I'd like to turn it over to you.
A very short report, but we had a very interesting month. I have to say thanks to Jeff Cross, Andrew, and his whole team, because they have been doing so much work on so many planning fronts, and I think really giving us a lot that we needed to do as a result of that. Not the least of which, and it really wasn't in our committee, but it was as a spin-off from our committee, which was a day of discussion about the far future and bringing in a great speaker and having a good discussion what's happening in transportation, which I just wanted to acknowledge, although it's not technically a part of my report. But this month, a couple of things are important, and you see them on your agenda. First is on the consent agenda, there is a resolution to renew the approval of the Bowen Island Independent Transit Service. We reviewed that in our committee, and with the report was complete, and we were very comfortable with that recommendation, and so we're recommending that, and I'll be pleased to move that when the time comes. The second, and I think a very, very important moment for our region and for TransLink, is that before you today, and we reviewed it in its final form in our committee, is the Regional Good Movement Policy. For the first time, after extensive work over several years, we will have a goods movement policy. We can begin to solve some of the contradictions that are out there. And if any citizen, most citizens are experiencing the contradictions between good movement, people movement. Many businesses are experiencing the difficulties with good movement, the difference in different parts of the region, the regulations and the standards and all that. And this will start to solve that. And secondly, it'll set a platform for even more innovation in the future. And we're going to get a major presentation on that just a little later. But I do want to say I think all of our committee was just so happy with the quality and the completeness of the work that's on this, and that it really does give us a good platform. And there's a resolution to approve that as well, and I think any person on our committee would be very happy to move that resolution. We also had an update, and Kevin's already given the details of this, on the transit fare review. We're at the end of the second phase. This is the public engagement. We also had a speaker today talking about this. I think the public is really wanting to see this fare review, and I would say fare reform, and to be able to deliver fares more fairly, but also not changing the budget, the needs of the fare box in our budget. So the work is presented, and I think that also is on today's agenda for more information. In addition, we did have a report on the implementation of the Custom Transit Action Plan. That's really the handy dart plan, and I wanted to emphasize, because our committee really felt this is so important, is that this program was not something that just was conjured up by TransLink, but it was extensively involving the public and advisory committee, and had wide support, you'll recall, when it came back to us. And so while some people may not be happy with those results, and we acknowledge everyone has that free choice, a lot of people have told us that they were happy with it, and the team that did it did an excellent, excellent job of reconciling many, many differences. And so the implementation of that is now well underway. We were given a detailed summary of that implementation. And then the final thing was we had a report from the new Vice Presidents of Communications on the customer communications program, but particularly, and I think this was most interesting to the committee, was on the emerging overall communication strategy that is being put together, that I think is really meant to diversify our communications, to outreach more, to build constituency for what we're about, and to reach our customers on an ongoing basis in a much more direct way. And we were very pleased with that report. It's something that's going to have to unfold over a while. It's not on today's public agenda, but there is really good progress being made on that. So, Madam Chair, that was the essence of what we dealt with this month.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for Larry in regards to his report before we go on to the more fulsome presentations? Okay, so would you like to move the consent agenda item?
I would. I'd like to move that.
Okay, seconder, and all in favor? Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to invite Andrew and Jeff up to the hot seat. And there's probably an extra mic, so you could actually each have one if you'd like to have one at that table. And we're going to talk about regional goods movement strategy.
Thank you, Chair and Board. With me is Andrew McCurran, the Director of Strategic Planning and Policy, who has been leading this effort for probably more years than he would care to, but we're really thrilled to be here at this point. It has been a long time coming. As was mentioned by Director Beasley, that there has never been, as far as we're aware, really a regional goods movement strategy that tied together all the different entities within the region and looked at both the road and marine and rail and air interface. So this is something that's we've been asked to look at for a long time. When our legislation was created back in 1998, it had a clear mandate that TransLink was responsible for the movement of both people and goods. And really, this strategy is a culmination of fulfilling that. And I would say what we heard both from our partners and our own assessment would be that we were not fulfilling that. We were doing so, the latter, on the goods movement. We were doing so by proxy in some ways, by focusing on moving as many people off the roads into, or either into buses or into SkyTrain or elsewhere. That did free up road space. That continues to be an important strategy for us. We were working on an ad hoc basis with some of our partners on significant bottlenecks and opportunities for projects when they came available, and doing some of the prioritization of our road network spending on that. But we had not really looked at how we could potentially be moving the needle. And many of our stakeholders were very aware that this was an unfulfilled piece of our mandate, and were basically asking us either act on it or maybe potentially give it up, and we should be thinking about a different strategy. So we were very motivated because we think we are in the right place to be looking at that. And this is the reason why I think there are a number of things that TransLink can do and it has shown that we can do as part of actually developing this strategy. I would say it's a bit of a microcosm of where we need to go from there. And it's really the convening factor of this. So we do have co-management authority over about 600 kilometers of major road network, 2,400 lane kilometers. So how we prioritize our investments in those in relation to goods movement, how do we manage it with our municipal partners? So what are the priorities, whether it be parking management or other things that we can look at from a regional basis. Moving over into the bottom left quadrant, TransLink does have a function as far as monitoring and managing the system, how it's actually doing. So we maintain the regional transportation model that all of our partners draw upon, whether they be the provincial government or municipalities or ourselves when we're looking at different projects, road or transit. We're also looking at the function that we can play in monitoring how congestion is, how it occurs today, how it's changing over time, and thus how all of our partners can be focusing on it with both investment management and partnering issues. As we move into the right, this sort of regional consistency, there are 22 municipalities, 1 First Nations, a provincial government, ICBC, etc. Then we have a very fractured system, and there yet to be a mechanism to bring people in to look at that, whether it be the definition of a truck or other things, and Andrew will go over a few of those. And then what is that avenue for having a regional discussion? So we are well placed. We've done this in the past with our Regional Transportation Advisory Committee, but we're basically expanding that model and convening the conversation and bringing in all of the partners at the highest levels, at the senior level, to be both at the private and the public sector to be working through the issues. And that mechanism had not existed. We have clear challenges, and I'm going to hand this over to Andrew to talk about. And the focus of this strategy is really on the road interface between rail, marine, and air, but locally, both at the sort of municipal level down to the major road network, and then into the intra and interregional. And you can see from there that the vast majority of of light truck activity within the region that had not previously been sort of focused on by the Gateway Council or others, is light traffic, and it's staying within Metro Vancouver. Then you see at the bottom that there is still the majority of even heavy truck travel is not between different regions or between Canada and the US. It is actually regional travel. So it's kind of, this shows both the role that we should be playing as well as the necessity to be looking at how regional traffic is both behaving and being managed and performing on both the provincial highway assets, on the municipal and regional, as well as those last mile issues. Turned over to Andrew to go through what the process has been to get to here, and then at the end we'll take any questions about the resolution that's before you and how we got to there, or any of the specifics.
Thanks very much, Jeff. So as Larry mentioned, we've collaborated with partners over the past 3 years really to develop and agree on the regional strategy that you've got before you today. Just a quick summary of the phases here. Really in phase one was about fact-finding. What are the key issues and challenges that the region is facing with respect to goods movement? We had dozens of meetings there with representatives from municipalities, provincial and federal government ministries, partner agencies, and industry groups around the region. And that led to, in phase two, the production of a first draft of the strategy. Again, we met with all of those groups, as well as posting drafts online on our website for broader public comment. Had a few major full-day workshops that involved representatives from both government and industry partners around the region. And that's led us to now phase three here, where we have a document that we feel is really, through multiple iterations, addressed all the outstanding substantive issues that have really been raised by all of our partners in the region. And we've now confirmed broad support for moving ahead with adopting this strategy. So we're bringing it to you today for adoption and approval. And I'll talk a little bit more at the end about implementing some of the priority actions that have emerged from the strategy. Just taking a step to the beginning, I guess here, where from the fact-finding mission at the beginning of this process, we articulated several key challenges that are really the driving force behind, the raison d'etre for putting the strategy together. So there are a couple key challenges that are around that prevent the private sector from really achieving its full potential. And the big one is really congestion and a lack of options for car drivers in particular to reduce their vehicle use, which leads to that roadway congestion that catches commercial vehicles up and hinders their travel time reliability, and is a major impediment to productivity in their business planning. Also a lack of coordination and consistency in regulations between jurisdictions, limited availability of accessible industrial land in the region, as well as a lack of broader awareness around the value and positive contribution to our economy of goods movement. So those are the key challenges in that category. There are a couple other key challenges that really relate to community livability impacts of goods movement. And here, namely the competition for scarce space on the roads and at the curbside, as you can see in this photo, aging infrastructure, safety and perceptions of safety, vibrations and noise, especially adjacent to residential areas, and emissions of visible smoke and air contaminants and greenhouse gas emissions. So those challenges are really the reason that that these two goals emerged as the central focus for the strategy. And I could summarize by saying that the challenges that the strategy really attempts to address is how to deliver goods and services more efficiently to more people and businesses, within a shared and increasingly limited space, but in a cleaner, quieter, safer, and more cost-effective way. So it's all of the actions in the strategy are trying to address both of those goals. And there's work underway right now to develop more detailed and measurable targets, so that we've got an ongoing performance monitoring regime to hold us accountable to those two goals. So then the strategy itself, the document, is organized into these three sections around investing strategically to maintain and grow the system, managing the system to be more efficient and user-focused, and partnering, working together with our partners to make it happen. There are 68 actions in the document itself, organized under these three headings, and I'll go through a few of the highlights in the next few slides. I just wanted to mention, though, that all of them we feel are important, resilient actions that need to happen irrespective of what sort of technological future emerges. So I know there was some discussion earlier about in Kevin's presentation this morning that technology is evolving rapidly. We're not sure exactly what the future landscape will look like, but most of these things are needed as a sort of foundational piece. So that's how we're seeing this strategy. So the first section, invest strategically to maintain and grow the system. This is really about investments needed in the region's road network in particular to ensure that goods and services can move around our region safely and reliably on infrastructure that's in a state of good repair. And we also point out that investments are needed in walking, cycling, and transit in order to give people choices and reduce congestion on our road network for commercial vehicles. The second section, manage the system to be efficient and user-focused. There's a lot of content in this section, actually. There's quite a bit of work to be done. A few of the areas to highlight are around some actions to improve safety, to reduce emissions with support for lower carbon goods movement. There are also a number of actions around harmonizing regulations to reduce the burden on industry. And I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. That's one of the priority actions that we're moving forward with. And another important point to highlight, the last action on the slide here is around pricing the transportation system more effectively as the single best tool to reduce congestion. And I wanted to flag that that's really a key point that we're hearing from industry and the BC Trucking Association and industry partners in particular. The boards of trade are largely supportive of this point, that they depend on being able to predict the travel time to move goods and services from place to place around the region. So that increased traffic congestion really causes uncertainty, forcing them to put larger buffers into their schedules, which increase costs, which they pass on to customers. The final section, partnering to make it happen, this is really focused on coordinating land use and transportation. A big focus here is on protecting accessible industrial land in support of the regional growth strategy. Also better data collection and ongoing performance monitoring, especially around those goals I mentioned earlier, and better coordination between partners. That one of the key things we heard was that there were a lot of different players in this in the world of goods movement. It wasn't really clear accountability. And so we needed to have a forum to have better coordination. And so to that point, actually one of the early actions that came out of the goods movement strategy was to form what's now called the Greater Vancouver Urban Freight Council. And we had the first meeting on May 2nd of this year, so just a little over a month ago. Kevin Desmond is the chair of the council, and it also includes 21 other organizations from both government and private sector industry. And the terms of reference is in your package at the back of the strategy here, so you can see who else is on the council. But really the purpose here is to champion the priorities in the goods movement strategy and to coordinate on issues that really require some collective action to help unblock where there are challenges with respect to implementation. And so these are all their senior level executive level reps from a number of different organizations. And they agreed at the first meeting in May that these were the 6 priorities that they would champion as part of the work program of the Urban Freight Council. So these are all actions that we pulled out of the goods movement strategy. There's broad support from stakeholders that these are all implementation priorities. And so you saw a few of these on the previous slides. I'm just going to focus on 2 of them in particular, which we think are sort of some of the lowest hanging fruit and the ones that the Urban Freight Council is especially excited to see some progress on. And the first one, developing a regional road network strategy. The challenge here is that right now in the region, the decisions and around managing and investing in the region's road network, whether they're TransLink, major road network roads, or provincial roads, or local municipal roads, typically are uncoordinated. The criteria, the performance criteria upon which we base those decisions are not well defined, not necessarily well shared or agreed upon in the region. And so that's one of the key, the first steps that this strategy proposes, to really have a shared, agreed upon framework for what we want to achieve with the region's road network. And then the scope of the project is to define a hierarchy of roads and clear performance metrics and an ongoing monitoring regime. So that will be incredibly useful for work related to mobility pricing, related to managing the MRN, related to decisions on investment in major road infrastructure. The second one I wanted to highlight was around streamlining processes to improve freight efficiency. And there are a few items under this broader action, but specifically the main problem that partners have identified is there are a variety of different bylaws around truck weights and dimensions. Almost every municipality has a slightly different definition, and that causes a lot of undue administrative burden for industry and for carriers. In addition, most municipalities have their own permitting process for commercial vehicles, so potentially a truck traveling from Hope to Delta might need 3 or 4 permits along the way, which they actually have to go online to get. This also raises questions around enforcement. Do municipalities have the resources to actually enforce each of those separate permits? So this process is really about regional harmonizing and streamlining to try to get common, agreed upon regional definitions and regulations, as well as a one-stop shop for permitting within the region. So we see that as pretty low-hanging fruit, as something that should just happen. I think all of our partners agree that that's something that should happen. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, and we're starting work right now with the Commercial Vehicle Working Group and through the Urban Freight Council to get that going. Just finish here with the proposed resolution that's before you, that after this years of work to put this strategy together, we're happy, very excited, in fact, to bring forward today a final draft for your review, approval, and adoption.
Thank you very much, both Jeff and Andrew. I can say, I know Larry's going to jump in here, but we're very excited that this has come before the board, and I know at the committee level, we spent a lot of time going through the detail of it. So I'm going to ask Larry to make the resolution. We'll have some discussion and debate, and then I'll call for the question.
I do want to make the resolution, so I'll so move, but I also just wanted to make one question and one comment if I could. I want to just clarify publicly one aspect, and that is that in the report, in the document, there is reference to industrial lands. And I understand, and we were advised at our committee, that the documentation of that is that basically you adopted the industrial land designations of Metro Vancouver. My assumption is that means that if and as that might change over time, that this policy would simply change with that. The reason I say that is a number of people feel that that industrial land strategy has some obsolescence to it, needs to be updated. And I don't think anyone wanted to think they were voting specifically on this industrial land pattern when they voted on this policy. And you confirmed for us that, in fact, when we vote for this policy, we're not voting for that particular industrial land pattern, but we're just using that as a reference for the rest of the work that's being done.
Yes, just to add to that, so we are, by mandate, we're responsible to support the regional growth strategy, which constantly evolves, and there is a integrated planning and a feedback loop between what we're doing as a transportation authority and what happens with the regional growth strategy, which is great. Metro Vancouver has been a very active partner in developing this strategy over the last 3 years. Their CAO, Carol Mason, is sitting on the Urban Freight Council as well, and we see that as that evolves and we can actually bring together the players around that Urban Freight Council to even talk about where some of those tensions may be, both from the private sector, goods movement sector, and the municipalities.
Thank you. My comment, very quickly, is that the importance to me of this strategy is not only will it solve a lot of problems that are hanging out there very much in need of being solved, but for the first time I think we're going to have a platform in which we can start to innovate. Because elsewhere around the world, these issues are being dealt with in innovations that go beyond the policy framework here. But I don't think you could possibly even entertain those innovations unless you had this framework and you started solving the obvious problems. This plan, this policy document basically assumes the existing road network as really what you have to work with. Innovation is moving into alternative road networks and alternative movement networks. I think this is an excellent starting point so that we can be on the front line of more of these innovations, say, over the next decade. So with that, I strongly support that. And our committee unanimously and strongly supported this as well.
So you're going to make the motion then? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so do I have a seconder for the motion before we go Okay, so Janet, you can second it, and then Murray has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. Something just crossed my mind when I was watching the slide on the standardization of the permitting processes that a few years ago when I was still working in municipal government, there was kind of an analogous circumstance around business licensing where contractors and others were doing business in multiple municipalities, but were required then to have a business license in multiple municipalities, and it made it awkward for them to do business. And the economic development officers advisory council in the region engaged in a process of developing a system where some business licenses could be ubiquitous or common across the region. So there may be some benefit in dealing with that, the economic development officers in relation to how that process evolved, and apply it to this process as well, because it seems like there's a lot of similarities. And in fact, there may be other ideas that come out of that economic development area that could help evolve the whole overall strategy as well, because their interest and the interest of commercial development generally is one of attracting business to the region. So this will be part of their marketing efforts as well, I assume, once it becomes adopted.
Chair, one of the conversations we actually had at the Urban Freight Council table was exactly on that point, that Metro Vancouver's leading work on a regional prosperity strategy, and the main focus for the prosperity strategy, the sort of early wins, is around harmonization of regulations for business licenses. In particular, they're looking at mobile businesses and film as the first two that they're starting with, but this fits squarely into that broader initiative. And at the July 7th meeting of the Metro Vancouver Mayor's Committee, Kevin is going to be presenting this work and specifically talking in a bit more detail about that third action item. And at the same time, that committee will be receiving a first report of the regional prosperity strategy. So I think there's a lot of potential to start aligning these things. Yeah.
Thank you. I have Janet, then Marcella, and then Tony.
Just quickly, having been on the committee, I've participated in the discussion. I should have asked this question then, but it didn't occur to me. But I'm just thinking through my Board of Trade work, I'm conscious of how the challenges around harmonization are also a challenge interprovincially and constitute a significant interprovincial trade barrier. So I'm wondering if there's been any discussion about that. I can appreciate that's a much bigger issue, but whether it's even on the agenda.
Yeah, that's a great point, Janet. And actually, the model that we would propose to follow here is very similar to the same conversation that happened at the national level. So a number of years ago, there were different regulations with respect to commercial vehicles and definitions, truck weights, and dimensions. At each province had their own rules. And so the federal government said, you guys need to harmonize, and coordinated the harmonization process. It was also a bit difficult, but they ultimately ended up with more of a harmonized process. And so I think we would like to see, to the extent possible, aligning with those provincial and national standards, but recognizing there might also be additional regional characteristics that might require some additional requirements. So we need to have our own regional conversation, but ideally it's as aligned as possible with the provincial and national standards. Yeah.
Marcella.
Thank you. Just a comment. This strategy has been sorely needed in this region for a long time for many reasons, and it's not going to just help with the goods movement piece, but it is going to help this entire region in terms of dealing with the complexity and congestion as it unfolds. And I know the freight community is just thrilled that you've gotten this together. So I just want to congratulate you. I know your team has been doing beyond yeoman's work on a number of fronts, and the fact that you can continue to deliver this terrific work involving the community, just kudos to you all. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, I just want to echo that too, Jeff and Andrew. I think great work, and I think this will really be a benefit to the goods movement. I had a question on the industrial lands, which I think Larry sort of addressed in his comments, but just maybe as a follow-up, I think by having the partners all sort of engaged, having data now that we can actually look at, hopefully that will lead to, hopefully that will not lead to what I call industrial land sprawl, but we can use that data to sort of intensify the use of industrial land and really get our efficiencies much higher. So I think when you look at other jurisdictions and their throughput in terms of cargo per square foot or per acre of land, I mean, we pale in comparison. So I think this will be a really good mechanism to sort of get all the people sort of talking and taking advantage of you know, the scarce land we do have, but using it as wisely as possible.
Okay, well, I think we've addressed all the questions, so I'll call for the question. All in favor of supporting the resolution is, thank you very much. Congratulations, guys. Yeah, well done. Okay, we're going to move on to the transit fare review. Andrew, thank you so much for all that. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah. Andrew's actually the director on this as well.
Oh,
but,
so Andrew's staying.
But no,
Stay,
this is going to be
Andrew.
quick. So in your package, you'll see the results of the phase 2 consultation that we undertook earlier this year. Just as a quick reminder, I am going to keep this one quick because we're going to really get into the protein of this process, I would say, in this fall. And that's when we start narrowing down to 3 or 4 kind of options for what the fare policy could look like that are very representative of what it might eventually play out. We would be prototyping those with prices and everything so that people can interface with it in a very realistic way. And Kevin talked earlier at the AGM in regards to how do you balance some of the needs for fairness, complexity with legibility of the system. So that's where we're actually heading towards. Phase 1 and Phase 2, which had really record levels of participation for us, over 30,000 surveys in Phase 1, 13,000 in Phase 2, gave us kind of the inputs to start narrowing in and where people's preferences lie, especially as it relates to how we charge by distance, time of day, and service type. And so those are going to be the models that we're really going to focus in, and you can see in the Phase 2 consultation where people's preferences lie and where there's still ambiguity, I would say, that we need to really test as we bring forward these packages of what a fare system might look like, and then decide as well when we go through that, working closely with the public stakeholders, user groups, how do we actually digest that into one recommendation? How do we think about even phasing over time as technology comes along to get to what an ultimate state might be? So we are posting the public consultation report online. We'll be coming back to you in September with what those materials will look like for that really detailed conversation later this fall. And we'll be looking at feedback on are we on the right path with these, et cetera, at that time.
Great, thank you. Now, I know the committee spent a fair amount of time on this, and so I think unless there's any further questions from any members of the board, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Andrew. I know you did all the work, and he's just trying to look good, right? Okay, we're going to move on now to the Finance and Audit Committee reports, and Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The committee met twice since our last board meeting, so we reviewed and discussed a number of reports. Obviously, I don't have the time to sort of report on all the things that we talked about, but there are some highlights that I'd like to share with the full board. First of all, we did review the financial and performance report for the first quarter. Positive news is that we did have a surplus of 34 million, which was 5% higher than budget. The board just received the full report, and it's been posted on our website for the general public if they want more details in terms of the first quarter results. Committee also reviewed the 2016 Financial Information Act filing. This is a legislative requirement to produce an annual report, and it provides a lot of detailed information on items such as employee remuneration over a certain threshold, board fees, suppliers, etc. And this report will also be posted on the TransLink website, I think, by the end of this month. Committee also reviewed 3 items that are included in the consent agenda, the Patella Bridge Condition Monitoring Report and the implementation of the 2014 SkyTrain independent reviews provided for information, but there is one item that requires that the committee recommended be forwarded to the board for approval, and that is a process surrounding approvals of capital project in terms of the process that those projects would go through. The committee welcomed Kurt Pregler, who's our new Chief Information Officer. He provided a detailed report on a number of initiatives. Also reported that good progress is being made on the 2017 IT program, which covers 30 different projects, so a lot of work there. We also received an update on our enterprise risk management program. As you know, we identified 8 top risks in 2016. So we have a status update on those risks, as well as the risk treatment plans that will be implemented between now and the end of the year in each of those 8 risks. We also received an insurance program update, and we reviewed the financial results for the year ending 2016. As you know, we have a sort of a self-insurance program, and we have an entity called TPCC, which is the Transportation Property and Casualty Company. On the positive front, we received a clean audit report from KPMG with respect to the financial results. We also received a report from Oliver Wyman, which are the actuarial consultants, and they confirmed that the minimum capital test, which is required by the Financial Institutions Commission of BC, so it's a regulatory requirement, that the TPCC exceeded that by 8 times. So it's in a very strong financial position, and so that gave us a lot of comfort. And next, we also received an update on the status of the 2017 internal audit program. It's a very robust program. There's 38 projects that are currently underway. Good progress is being made on all of those. The committee reviewed a number of reports for completed projects, and I just wanted to mention one project, which is the Rapid Transit Company IT Security Administrative Network. So this was a reassessment of an audit that was done in 2014, and the internal audit group gave this group an exemplary rating. And as they determined that of the 37 findings in the 2014 audit, that they had mitigated all 37 of those findings. So I just want to commend the IT group from the Rapid Transit Company on their efforts on making this happen. A lot of good work there. And then lastly, we reviewed the status of the major capital projects, and good progress is being made on all 3 of them. And I think Sandy is going to actually give a bit of an update on those projects after we complete this part of the agenda. So that's my report.
Great, thank you, Tony. So would you like to make the resolution for the capital projects approval controls?
Yeah, so I will move that forward to the board in terms of make a motion on that.
All right, and it's in our package. Seconded, and all in favor of that? Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on now. So we'll invite Sandy up. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and board members. I can keep this fairly brief. I know you've all seen the reports, and I'll give an overview, and then we can do just any questions and answers.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So this is just a quick overview of the latest progress on the 3 major projects: the Patillo replacement, the Millennium Line Broadway extension, and the Surrey Newton Guildford line in Surrey. A lot of good progress has been made in the last quarter. We have effectively wrapped up the due diligence process. We worked with the province and the municipalities, and it was really a very worthwhile exercise for all 3 projects. We identified opportunities to make the projects better, improving benefits, improving the value, looking at constructability, looking at opportunities for just improving the outcomes and the benefits of the projects. Really good ideas came out of that. The technical teams working with the municipalities then took those ideas and are now evolving them and finding out what would really be adding value to the business cases. So from now we move on into preparing the final business cases for these 3 projects. We are targeting August to be the month where we have a final business case for the Patillo Bridge, and September when we'll have the final business cases for the 2 rapid transit projects. This would be the final key step in helping us nail down the funding requirements for these 3 projects. So that is on track. The business cases will define the final scopes, schedules, budgets, the funding arrangements for the projects, as well as governance and the delivery models. So a lot of work ahead of us in July, August, September to get us to that point. That will then be the lead-off point into putting those projects into investment plans. We are targeting the Patillo investment plan in September, so about a month after the business case. And by the end of the year, the investment plan should be ready for the other two rapid transit projects. What is really important to mention is that the procurement readiness work gets stale fairly quickly. So as you've been hearing this morning, and the continued emphasis, we need the funding to come into place to allow us to then move into the procurement phase on these projects in a timely manner. What we'd be hoping to do is the request for qualifications for Patillo this year, and then the request for qualifications for rapid transit in the first half of next year to allow all the good work that's happened in the last 18 months to actually be put to good use. So again, emphasis on getting to yes and getting to yes quickly on the funding piece. If all goes well, procurement for these sizes of projects is typically 15 months, request for qualifications, then request for proposals, and then we can be moving into construction on all three projects in 2019, according to that time frame. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions for the board.
Okay, any questions for Sani? Sani, I'm wondering how realistic is it that all three projects will be going at the same time? I've been asked that question by people. Are you serious? You're going to do all three of them at the same time?
Good question. We hear it a lot, and a couple of answers. We're in regular contact with the engineering and construction and contracting community. They're coming to see us, and they are ready to go. They are fully aware of this program. They're eager. This, as you all know, this industry has become national and international, and where the work is, the industry shifts and focuses. So that's one part of the answer. The other is this region itself has a history of delivering a program this size and more in the run up to the Olympics. So this is not new to the region. We had Golden Ears Bridge, Sea to Sky Highway, South Fraser Perimeter Road, Canada Line, all being built concurrently in the 2 or 3 years leading up to the Olympics. So we've done it before, we'll do it again.
Great, thank you. Murray?
Thank you. Just on the request for qualifications process, can that be done in advance of the investment plan being completed?
Good question. The advice we get is all the funding should be secured and in place before we initiate the formal procurement process. The industry teams will create partnerships within themselves, and typically the RFQ process takes 3 to 4 months, and then they want to know who's been shortlisted because it's a huge investment in time, material, people, and cost on their end. So if there is a gap between the RFQ and the RFP, while funding is being secured, those partnerships start to dismantle, and it's difficult for them to keep the teams together. So industry's preference is always, and their advice is, make sure the funding is ready, the projects are ready to go before the RFQ.
And also, would there, in relation to the RFQ process, that would be at the nickel of the consortiums that form around that. We wouldn't be paying for that. So we'll just be looking for people to prepare qualification proposals for submission once we have an investment plan in place, and then proceed beyond that as the process naturally evolves.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Larry?
I think we're all pretty optimistic about the two rapid transit or two transit projects. Could you just remind us of what the two parties have said about funding for the Patillo Bridge project?
Sure. I think Kevin can jump in. I'm sure at a high promissory level, both political parties have stated very strong support for the Patillo Bridge project, and that they want to work with TransLink to make sure that the replacement project happens. As I think Kevin alluded to earlier, the mechanics of if tolls are no longer an option, how will they make us whole? That those conversations are to come. But both the NDP and the Liberals have stated they want this project to proceed.
And they both understand the urgency of this timing.
We've been in very close, almost daily contact with officials at the province, and yes, they fully understand the urgency.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then thank you very much, Sani. We look forward to the full business cases when they're ready to go. We'll be keenly interested in all that detail. So thank you. So we're going to move on to the Human Resources and Governance Committee report, and I'm going to turn it over to Jim Chu. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee met earlier this month. On the human resources front, we discussed the Vice President of HR quarterly report. We received updates on an employee engagement survey, corporate wellness, organizational diversity. Also, we received the 2016 annual people report. That's included in the board package, available to the general public, and of course is widely shared with our staff. On the governance front, we discussed amendments to the manual to reflect current committee structure, an updated capital project approval process, and also a requirement for directors to attend board meetings in person, no more teleconference. And prior to the meeting, we had a get-together with our subsidiary board chairs from Coast Mountain Bus and also BC Rapid Transit. So that was Chair Mike McDaniel and Chair Linda Cranston discussed their issues and mutual areas that we need to work together on. It's nice to open that dialogue with those representatives from those organizations. And so then I would like to just make one motion, which is to move the amendments to the board governance manual that reflect the updated committee structure.
Great, all in favor? Thank you all very much. I know you went through those with a fine-tooth comb. The pages and pages of amendments. Okay, Jim, are you complete with your report then? Okay, well, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our business for the day. And so I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting. And all in favor, thank you. So thank you all very much for staying right through to the end and hanging in there with us. We appreciate your interest in TransLink. Thank you.